Hey, it's a drink with Derek. Derek Richards here. That is Tom Cotter, who is in New York. Tom Cotter, you've seen him on America's Got Talent. You've seen him on Comedy Central. You've heard him on Howard Stern, Last Comic Standing. He's got a book called Bad Parenting, Bad Dad, Guide to Pitiful Parenting. We'll talk about that here in a second. Find him online, tomcotter.com. Tom, how are you, my friend?
I'm well. Honored to be on with you, Derek. Thanks for having me.
Honored to have you, sir. So I got to ask you this. I know you're a huge New England Patriots fan. When Tom left, did you cry or did you go, you know what? We had a good run. I'm okay.
The latter. I'm hoping that he has a great season. He's 43 years old. They also stole Gronk from us. So they took our greatest quarterback of all time, arguably, and greatest tight end of all time, arguably. So they will be my NFC team, the Buccaneers, but I'll still be a loyal Patriots fan. Our dog is actually named Brady, and we're not renaming the dog.
Not going to rename him Newton?
No. No, Michael Vick or any other quarterback. No.
Dude, you've been around this business a long time. Your dad was a physician.
Yes.
Did you ever want to do that? I mean, you're growing up in that environment. How did you end up becoming a comedian, and how did he even react to that when you wanted to do this?
You know, we just had a family Zoom and we were talking about this. My dad was, he was not a great dad in the sense that he wasn't around a lot. He came to one wrestling match my entire junior high school and high school career, never came to any lacrosse games or anything. And back then I was bitter and I thought he was kind of a jerk to do that. But now I realize he was working the whole time. He worked like a madman, and he was a neurosurgeon and he had a great practice. And any one of his 6 kids could have walked into that practice. He had spent decades establishing this practice, and it was a very lucrative, wonderful practice. But not one of us wanted to do it. Why? Because we saw how hard he worked. It was just horrible. He was never home. He would be in the operating room before I got out of bed in the morning, and he would be making rounds to see his patients post-op late until the evening. So I was already in bed before he got home. So I never saw the guy. And no, I never wanted that life. And he was pretty surprisingly supportive of my career choice because he spent a lot of money on private schools for all of us in colleges. And when his youngest decided to tell jokes in a basement, that was probably not the proudest day in his life, for him. But and early on, Derek, the things I did early on, like you, the stuff we did, nobody knew. It was Comedy Central. It was Ha. It was VH1, stuff he doesn't relate to. But when I finally did The Tonight Show, he realized I wasn't a complete waste of sperm and said, okay, I'll let, plus it helps that my next older brother keeps going back to the well. So, it's I don't do that. And so long answer to your short question is no. I'm not sad that I didn't go into it. It's brain surgery. It's a lot harder than what I do. I tell jokes to drunks, and he does laser surgery through a microscope, and I didn't want any part of that.
Well, he's got to be dedicated. You don't want a C student to be your neurosurgeon.
No. He's a brilliant.
You don't want the guy rolling in like you or me after an all-night bender, bloodshot eyes, big cup of coffee. Sweaty, hair's all kind of disheveled. And you're like, woo, what's going on today? And you're like, that's not the guy I want touching my brain.
The statute of limitations has probably expired, so I can say this. He would come home and drink Manhattans. That was his drink, Manhattans, which is 2 Canadian Club shots of whiskey and then 1 vermouth and some bitters and cherries or something. That's probably him calling now. I would watch him be on call. He would be on call with 2 Manhattans in him, and he'd have to go back in, and I'm like, Dad, A, you shouldn't get behind the wheel, and B, you shouldn't get in someone's brain. But he did it anyway and was never sued, so he wins.
Your dad is so Irish.
Oh, yeah. So true. So true.
What you started off as more of a blue/dirty working act, and then you've switched to working extremely clean. I mean, when did that change come about? What precipitated it? Was there somebody that said something to you, or did you just kind of make the change yourself?
It was a mixture of things, but it was peer pressure. It was Mike McCarthy, who's a dear friend of ours from your comedy tour, and Rogan and I were like the three guys that none of the headliners wanted to work with. And it wasn't because we were that funny. I mean, those guys are very funny, but it was because we would ruin the room. You couldn't have a clean and clever comic like Jonathan Katz or Brian Kiley or someone like that go up after we were talking about banging fat chicks. You just couldn't do that.
Right.
So a couple of them hotboxed me and said, yeah, here's the thing. We sat down and had a drink, and they said, nobody wants to work with you. And you don't seem like a douche, but the problem is you're filthy. You do 15 minutes of filth, and nobody wants to follow that. Nobody wants to go and dig out of that hole. And now, years later, of course, I get it. But to Rogan's credit, he said, screw you, I'm going to keep doing what I do. And he's had a much better career than I could ever dream of. And McCarthy kind of stuck to his guns, but he cleans it up when he has to, as you know. And that's what I did. It was all about money for me, Derek. They said to me, and these were headliners, established headliners, said, you're not going to be able to work cruise ships. You can't work country clubs. You can't work some colleges if you're doing the act you're doing. And if you want to expand those horizons and make money doing this, you kind of have to play the game. And I took their advice to heart, and Rogan still shits on me for doing that, but I did. And my bills are being paid. So I'm glad I made the decision. And I pulled a couple of younger comics aside myself and said, look, I love Dave Attell. He's one of my favorite comics in the world, but he doesn't do corporate because he can't. If you want the big money, you got to play the game. And so sometimes you got to, unfortunately, put your artistic integrity on the shelf if you want to make the big bang. And then, once you're making money, then you can do whatever the hell you want. But I needed to make money at the time, or a day job was not an option. So I cleaned it up a little bit.
Well, and also too, I mean, you go back and you do stuff that's a little more risque. I mean, we worked together on some military shows, and I've seen your act. I mean, it's, you have your stuff that's clean, then you can easily shift over and do stuff that's a little more risque in an environment that allows you to do that. So, when people say, "Oh, you're a complete sellout," it's like, well, no, I mean, you're selling out to fit the environment that you're in. I mean, you've got to be somewhat of a chameleon in this business in order to, like you said, make money. If you're going to be standing in front of a college, you're not going to be, making certain jokes or, or in front of Microsoft. It's like, you know what? I'm getting a $5,000 check for doing this show. I can probably go through this thing and not talk about jerking off on some chick's face.
That is true. I did a show for Chick-fil-A, and as you know, that's a very Christian organization. Oh, yeah. They're not even open on Sundays, and they asked me to go do this show for them, and they had scouted me, Derek. They had it all written out, transcribed my bits, and they're like, we can't have you do this. I'm like, I won't do that. For what you're paying me, I will eliminate the word "the" if you want. And I did, and I went and did the gig, and it was a lot of pressure, but I needed that paycheck. So I'll steal. And now, I was saying before COVID, comedy was already doomed because people were so politically correct. People are just showing up at comedy clubs waiting for you to utter that sentence that's going to send them into a tizzy in their safe space, and then they go online and eviscerate you, and then other people jump in who weren't even there. So that was before COVID. Now we have COVID, so I'll do anything. I'm a comedy whore, but I will work anywhere and do whatever they want me to do to please their audience. And I don't feel like I'm selling out at all. I feel like I'm doing what I like to do.
Now, we've both shared many a cocktail through the years. Is there any story or situation that an inappropriate thing that you've done at a bar years ago where you go, thank God we didn't have cameras on videos back then, because this would have 5 million views if it got out there?
I'm still nervous that it's still out there, that that there are videos that I don't know of that haven't, because I have 3 sons. And so, Dad was a little bit of a loose cannon when they were not conceived yet. And so I used to do a thing that we used to do in my fraternity in college, and it was called the sack walk or hanging brain, which is where you leave your penis in your fly, but you take his 2 friends, testicle 1 and testicle 2, and you hang them outside of your fly. and you try to see how long you can engage someone with a conversation before they realize it and run away horrified. And so when we wanted to end a party at my fraternity, someone would whisper "sackwalk," and you would just do it. Some people call it hang in brain, but you'd slowly and very cryptically remove your testicles from your trousers and hang them out there, and within seconds, the sorority girls one of them would see one and see another, and then they'd all flee in horror, and the mission accomplished. The party was over. Well, I kind of brought that into the bar scene in Boston when I was doing comedy, and there are some photos out there that some people caught that I hope will never emerge. But yeah, so that was always done under the influence of alcohol, obviously. Haven't done it in decades, but that was something that I did quite often.
I was so hoping you would tell that story.
Yeah,
when I was thinking that question, I'm like, this has got to be the answer that he's going to give. And
there's so many. And then one time there was a Christmas party for the Comedy Connection in Boston had a Christmas party, and we were all at a bar, and I came outside the bar to talk to some people on the sidewalk, and it was freezing out. And everybody was on the other side of the glass inside the restaurant. So, of course, I removed my testicles and I pushed them up against the glass. And when I pulled them away because of the cold, there was steam around the imprint of my scrotum on the window that stayed there for like an hour. And people just kept pointing, going, "Oh, my God, her steamy balls are still up on the window." Yeah, there was a lot of that. I was a bad guy when I was young. I'm much more mature now.
What was your? Well, I mean, it's going to be hard to top your pressed testicles against the window. But what was your best drunk story?
Oh God,
I always been asking this because the best drunk story can be the worst drunk story at the same time.
I fell asleep in my a rival fraternities. They had a sleeping dorm. They have a dorm where everybody sleeps because the rooms are so small. So I fell asleep in their sleeping dorm. And I woke up the next morning. I was like, "Oh my God, I pissed my pants." I had done that before, passing out drunk, pissed my pants. And it wasn't until a couple years after I graduated college, one of those betas came up to me and said, "I remember one night you slept in our dorm. We all took turns pissing on you." So a bunch of guys came and pissed all over me while I was passed out. And I thought it was my urine the whole time. I'm like, wow, I really had to go.
Oh my God.
That was horrible. What else? We were hitting on this girl in this again. These are college stories. We were hitting on a girl, and there was a ladder outside my bedroom because I would occasionally host what we called a pig beast in college. It was an unflattering woman, but I would host her in my room to entertain my friends, and we would and sometimes they'd climb up the ladder to watch. Well, I had this girl in my room with two of my fraternity brothers, and she was like, "I'm going to do a threesome with you guys." She kept saying, "I'm going to do a threesome." She ended up being a tease that never happened. But at one point, we kept going out the window, putting our hand out the window because they were out on the ladder, my fraternity brothers, to watch, and they would high five our hands. And then she saw one of my fraternity brothers getting a high five out the window. She's like, "Why are you putting your hand out the window?" And he said, "Oh, it's raining." So she put her hand out the window, and they didn't know it was her hand. So they gave her a high five off the ladder, and she ran screaming out of our house. And for 2 days, we were like, "Oh God, the dean's going to call. We're expelled." Yeah, there's a bunch of those stupid stories. The night I pledged my fraternity, I had 24 shots, and I had a card around my neck, and it listed what the shots were. And my dad told me the next morning I should be dead. I really should have gagged on my vomit and been dead. But in the middle of the night, I pledged Alpha Tau Omega, and I was between Alpha Tau Omega and Sigma Chi. And in the middle of the night, they woke me up to make sure that we were alive. And when I woke up, I started screaming, "I'm a Sigma Chi, I'm a Sigma Chi," and I wasn't. I was in the Alpha Tau Omega house, and that caused a lot of ruffled feathers with my fraternity brothers early on. There's a bunch of them. They're only entertaining to me. Sorry.
No, they're very entertaining.
Okay, good.
My favorite is all the other fraternity guys actually urinating on you, which that is such a
taking turns peeing on me. Yeah,
that's impressive. What you got a book called "Bad Dad Guide to Pitiful Parenting." You've got 3 sons right now. What brought that book to you? Was it you seeing bad parents? Was it you just Is it through your experiences? What brought this book out?
You know, Derek, it was 30 years of writing one-liners. I just had a million one-liners, and a lot of them, you write what you know, and for the last 17 years, I've been a dad, so you write things about being a dad, and so I just had a billion of them that weren't in my act. They were just kind of one-liners that were all by themselves, and I said, you know what, I'm going to compile one. My wife, as you know, is a comic, and she wrote a book called Mean Mommy that same year. And I said, well, I'm going to piggyback on that and do Bad Dad. So we both came out with our books the same year, and our children will be in counseling. But yeah, my book is not for the easily offended. And if you're a born again Christian or a devout Muslim, this is not the book for you. But if you want to laugh, I think it's funny. It was the inspiration was deeper thoughts. Do you remember Jack Handy from Saturday Night Live would do those little fake motivational speaking? I loved those. Those were my favorite part, even more than Weekend Update. When I would watch Saturday Night Live, I really looked forward to those, and that was kind of the template for what I wanted to do. So it starts off as like a warm and fuzzy, and then takes a horrible left turn into depravity, each one. And so that's probably what I wanted to do, and I just put it together.
Well, you mentioned your wife as a comic, Carrie Louise, very, very funny. What's that dynamic like, being married to another comedian? I know a couple of comedy couples. I know some have made it. Some are divorced now. I mean, how has that? How have you pulled that off? I mean, that seems like it would be extremely competitive, difficult. You know, you get booked someplace, she doesn't, vice versa, and you're like, what's wrong with that booker? How come I can't get in to do this gig? How come you're doing it? I mean, how have you guys been able to get over that?
You know, we were married 20 years, and we were together 6 years before that. We had a 6-year courtship, as they call it. She has gotten things that I haven't gotten, and I've gotten things that she hasn't gotten. She got Aspen Comedy Festival before I did, and she went further on Last Comic Standing than I did, and don't think I don't hear about that every time we have an argument. And then I had a little more success on America's Got Talent. So generally, we're not competing against each other. If they're looking for a short, middle-aged white dude, they're not looking for her, you know? And if they're looking for, a chick that's funny, they're not looking for me. So we're supportive of each other. It is tough. You know, you say most of the men in divorce, our role models were Meg Ryan was married to some actor. I can't remember what his name is, for a while. And then Demi Moore and Bruce Willis were a Hollywood couple, and Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman. And we always used to look and say, they can do it. We're going to be fine. Look at that. They're together, and none of them are together anymore. They all have, all three of those relationships I just mentioned have crashed and burned, as many have. But, on our level, Al Ducharme and Bernadette Pauly are still together. Rich Voss and Bonnie McFarlane are still together. We're an anomaly. There's not many of us. And so when people want that, there's only certain people you can go to. So Carrie and I are always asked to do a comedy team thing. We do it all the time. And it's because it's an anomaly. People are nostalgic of the old days of Desi and Lucy and George Gracie. So they like that, especially the older people. And so we will do it because we're whores when they want us to. And we make it work. Her style is different than mine. I'm a one-liner kind of rapid fire guy, and she's a storyteller. But when we do it, we somehow make it work, and we merge it together. And I'm not dumping her. I think we'll stay together because of the kids, because nobody wants custody, seriously. So we're going to stick it out. I could be wrong. She could be banging the pool guy right now. I don't know. We don't have a clue. It would be awkward, but we'll see.
What your style is? People that have not seen you should see you. You're hilarious, one of my favorite comedians, and that's no bullshit.
Mutual Admiration Society, by the way. Big film. You're
very, very kind. But your style, you were on America's Got Talent. You were the runner-up in season 7. Should have won. But your style, when you were advancing through America's Got Talent, every comic that I knew that knew you, we were all saying this show is tailor-made for Cotter. And I mean, because your style is just bam, 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 bam. It's not, there's no long form storytelling setup stuff. And in that 90-second window that you have, I mean, that was the perfect one like yourself.
Which is why the show is unfair. It's inherently unfair because it is good for Wendy Liebman. It was good for me. It's good for other comics that have been on the show that are short form comics. But there are some hysterical comics, as you know. There are these long storytellers. And
Right.
it's not fair because we had 90 seconds my year. Now I think it's 2 minutes, but we only had 90 seconds. And in 90 seconds, a storyteller can't, it takes them 90 seconds to say hello to the audience. Whereas a one-liner guy, an Emo Phillips or, somebody like that has a much better chance in that 90-second window. So, I love the show. It was great for me. I will never besmirch the show, but I'm just saying that it's not fair to other comics who have other styles because that narrow window within which to operate, that 90 seconds, doesn't lend itself to that style. But the show was very good to me, and I don't even know what the initial question was. I got off on a tangent because I smoke a lot of. Anyway, go ahead.
No, that was perfect. My question that I was going to lead into this was, well, first off, yeah, because the style was your style was made for that show. But what do people not know about that experience that you had on America's Got Talent?
Well, again, I'm not besmirching the show. I love the show, but the reality is never reality. And I learned that early on. I learned that on Last Comic Standing when I went to the Vegas show because my wife was in the top 20 and they were going to whittle 20 down to 10 and 10 went into the Comedy House. This is back when they had the Comedy House on that show. And we watched Dan Natterman get a huge standing ovation and a guy named Monty Hoffman, who I've never seen before or after, get a huge standing ovation. And they didn't get into the house. And two people who got booed off the stage that night got into the house. So I knew right then that, that it was all BS. And Drew Carey, who was a judge that season, went to the press. He was on the cover of Entertainment Weekly and said it was all BS. And it is. I mean, reality shows are BS. And my show, America's Got Talent, is no stranger to that. Carrie and I now call it America's Got Problems because everybody has to have some kind of affliction to make it into the finals. The last couple of comics who've been on, last year it was a guy who has a birth defect, God bless him, but he has, arms that are weird. And then it was
Ryan Niemiller or something like that.
Yeah, very funny guy. I think he's
funny guy, but you're right.
I'm not talking about their talent at all. They're all very talented. But there was a guy who stuttered a couple of years before that, and another guy with Tourette syndrome before that. And we were all like, what? And that's just the comedy category. Then you had a girl who was a singer who was a burn victim, the sole survivor of a plane crash. Another girl whose father was diagnosed with cancer on the first episode and died by the fourth episode. So every single show, you need a box of tissues. I used to before because I would, but now it's I just reality is never reality. But I hate that they present it to the world that this is reality because it's not. And things you don't know about that show are that I will tell you that my season, one of the guys who was the fourth place finisher was the sand artist. He told stories in the sand. And our final was in New York on September 12th. That was the finale of America's Got Talent. He did a sand story that I watched him do countless times backstage about the World Trade Center, about the terrorist bombing on 9/11. Right. Had he been able to do that story that night on the 12th of September when 9/11 was still kind of fresh in everyone's mind, he would have won. He absolutely would have won, but they wouldn't let him do that because they said they didn't have the rights to the music he wanted to use, which was BS. He found out later they definitely had the rights, but they just didn't want him to win. Had he done that in New York in front of a New York audience, are you telling me he wouldn't have beaten Joke Boy and the Dogs? He definitely would have. So there's that kind of stuff that goes on. But again, the show was good to me. I'm not crapping on the show. I'm just telling you that it's never what it presents to be. No,
you're giving the actual reality version of a reality show.
Yeah. But it's a great vehicle, and it's time honored. Everyone loves the vaudeville kind of variety show, and that's what America's Got Talent is.
What was it like when you were getting recognized out in the streets when that season was airing? Was it weird?
Yeah, during that show, I remember one night this woman said, and I'll never forget, she said, "That's him, officer, third from the left." and it felt good to be single. No, I'm sorry. That was kind of neat. Your flavor of the month for a while. And still, here I am years and years later. I just did the Champion show 2 years ago. So the people who know that show are fanatics. I mean, they put the fan in fanatic, and they really are. So people still, if they're fans of the show, will stop me, and I'm like, wow. I mean, that was, how many seasons ago was that? And they still remember everybody. They remember all the finalists and everything. So they're all very much involved in that. But that luster has gone off now. And now with COVID, nobody knows who the hell I am.
Nobody knows who anybody is anymore. It's now you were on the dais for the Friars Club roast of Boomer Esiason. What was your best Boomer Esiason roast slam or slams?
I don't know what I said. I know, God, what did we do that night? Usually for those things, I make fun of the other people on the dais as much as I make fun of Boomer.
Sure.
Boomer was, his kid has, some kind of affliction. And
he's now on America's Got Talent.
Yeah, he should go on HGTV to win. And he's such a good guy that he's one of those people where, if you watch these Friars roasts, sometimes the person is, everyone loves the person the roastee so much that they just bash everybody else on the dais. And I spent most of that time shitting on Jim Norton and Dan Marino and Jeff Garland from
Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Yeah. He was the roast master. And I don't know. I can't even remember those lines. That was a long time ago. That was a fun one, though. The Smothers Brothers was my favorite that I did just because they were such good guys and so nice. Boomer was great, but he had his handlers bring him in at the end, and then he left the stage before anybody else. So he didn't really hang with any of it. But, I don't remember. I really don't remember any.
Were there any slams that you had on Dan Marino that you can think of off the top of your head? Was there anything that sticks out where you
I said something about him never winning a Super Bowl, but other people had also shit on him for that. Saying, "Why are you even up here? You don't even have a ring." But he obviously the guy was great, freakishly tall, and. I'm sorry. That's a boring answer, but I don't even remember.
Well, now, was there anybody that was on? Because sometimes you see those roasts and you see when someone gets slammed, and instead of them laughing and realizing that it's a comedy show, that you look at them and you see the look on their face like, I want to kill you.
Bill Cowart. Bill Cowart was the Steelers head coach, and at some point he had coached Boomer, and I don't think his handlers told him what to expect. And he just thought it was going to be like a comedy show. And he was up there and he was taking shots and there was never a smile. He's kind of a stoic guy anyway. But I mean, he did not crack a smile. We were all like, oh my God, this guy is going to bludgeon somebody after this. And he doesn't get the concept that this is, that everybody's fair game that's on the dais. So he was the guy with the least sense of humor that day. Now, he may have just been playing a character and pretending to be pissed off, but he was visibly pissed off. But you're right. There are some guys on like Carrot Top was abused on one of those roasts not too long ago. And it was like, Jesus Christ, dude, take a joke. You're on the dais. And I love Carrot Top. But, if you show weakness, if you show that they're getting to you, they're just going to come after you even more. So you just have to laugh along with it.
Yeah. Yeah, that was when you see some of those roasts and you see someone visibly uncomfortable. I mean, now, did you have any roast slams on Bill Cowart, or did you see what was going down before you went up there and you went, oh, I should not say anything?
I had A jokes, B jokes, and C jokes. I had some for him, but I wasn't going to rush to get to them knowing that he wasn't taking them well. Who wants to shit on somebody that they're having a pouty puss, that's not getting it? That's no fun. That's just making people uncomfortable. I like to go after people who will laugh hysterically when you shit on them. And, have a sense of humor.
Well, in that case, it's great that you didn't go up early on and start slamming him, and he's just giving you the death stare. And all the other comics are in the back going, oh, shit, get rid of all the Bill Cowart.
Well, that's what I did anyway. I was on towards the end. Jim Norton and I were at the end of that roast. And so the entire roast, you're doing this. You're crossing out because everybody's doing lines that you had thought of also.
Sure.
A lot of these guys have writers. Some of the celebs, they have comedy writers writing for them that are provided by Comedy Central or the Friars Club.
Right.
And we don't. So, you have to, if a topic had already been broached so many times, you had to leave it alone. The other guy, Boomer, was on the air at the time with Carton, and they were on the Fan, WFAN, sports radio here in Boston. It was the highest rated morning show, and they were a great team. And Carton was just getting in trouble for some gambling. He was unfortunately had some gambling issues, and so people started going after him about that. And at first he was kind of taking it pretty well, but then he started getting a little annoyed and a little pissed off. So again, I'm sitting there crossing stuff out as I'm going on. And those are some of my best lines. I was like, shit. But that's the way the roast world works. It's crazy.
You were on Howard Stern. How many times have you been on with him? I know you were on. I remember seeing a clip of you on the show once. Was it right around America's Got Talent or Last Comic Standing?
After AGT, because he was one of my judges, and he was great to me on the show. He was really supportive, and he wanted either a rock band or a comedian to win, and so he was annoyed when the Dog Act won. Sharon Osbourne was the big proponent of the Dog Act, and Howie Mandel was a friend of everybody. He was supportive to me because I'm a comic, but he was also supportive of other acts. He was just kind of a overall good dude. But Stern had me on. And it was kind of scary. His producers came into the room beforehand and said, Howard doesn't know, how long he's going to be going back to the show. He did go on after I was on. So we have to be careful about how much we crap on the show on the air. And I said, okay, absolutely. I'm not going to crap on the show. And he was really good to me. And then he invited my wife in. To get up to do that show, we had to get up at 5 a.m. And Kerry got all dolled up, hoping that she would be called onto the air. And sure enough, Howard and I had a nice conversation for about 25 minutes, and then he said, I heard your wife's here. Can I meet her? And I go, oh, Jesus. And then he invited her into the room, and within 2 seconds, he's like, has Tom explored all your caves? He's asking all these really horrible questions. And my dad is listening on his car because he just bought a new car that came with free Sirius satellite radio. So he's in his driveway in Florida listening with the neighbors. And my wife's parents are listening, and he's like, was anal uncomfortable with Tom? And I'm like, Jesus Christ. And it just went right into the gutter. But we had a great interview. It was a lot of fun. And then I went back a few other times to do the wrap-up show and some other stuff. And then I did his wife is a big animal fan, and we did the charity she does. She has a big cat pavilion that's named after her at the North Shore Animal League. And she's, she supports these animal rights things. And so thought that since I lost to a Dog Act, wouldn't that be fun to have me on the show? So I went and did that a few times. But he's been nothing but cool. He's a great guy.
When are we going to see the Tom Cotter Cat Pavilion? I guess would be.
We call it the Pussy Palace, but a cat pavilion.
Okay. Okay.
It's a different kind of business.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Although I think naming a strip club the Cat Pavilion would be pretty impressive.
It would be. It would sound like a gentleman's club and not just a strip joint. Yeah. I love going to those places. I went to one recently where there was a handicap ramp up to the stage, which is not a good sign. It's generally not a good sign if there's a handicap ramp up to the stage.
Hey, I guarantee you there is a search on Pornhub that says handicap strippers.
I may have actually conducted that search. We don't know.
No one will ever see my browser history. I will burn this computer on my deathbed. I guarantee you that. And
let me just say, you will never catch me in a strip club unless it's under video surveillance, and then 3 times a week, probably at the most.
What was it like start? You had started off in New England.
Yeah,
amazing scene for comedy. What was that like being around those? I mean, I think it's the best comedy scene that's out there. I mean, when you look at the people that came out of that area, Joe Rogan. I mean, in terms of like the big name acts. I mean, you're Stephen Wright, Joe Rogan, Nick DiPaolo was up there.
Cook, Jay Leno, Dennis Leary. We had
Yeah.
So many of them came out of the colleges there, Derek. They weren't even really Bostonians. They just went to college there and in college started doing comedy. So you had so many transplanted people. Tom Kenny, who was the voice of SpongeBob, they all went to Emerson, all these guys. And so they were such like a close-knit group. And they were so tight and so funny. And I missed the boom by just a little bit. I moved to Boston in '89, and the boom was the mid '80s. So when I got there, people were like, "Oh, I feel bad for you. You're not. It used to be much better." But even when I was there, it was like, it was 3 open mic nights a week. Plus, there's other paid gigs you can do all over the place. There were tons of work, and then karaoke came along and killed it. But it was great for a long time. And what a great proving ground. I'm glad a lot of guys went right. I started in Rhode Island, and there's no comedy scene in Rhode Island. So you either choose to drive an hour north to Boston or 3 hours south to New York. And I'm glad I took the detour of going north before going south, because Boston was just a great proving ground for comics. And we were really taught how to. You learn how to, I hate to say this, but you learn how to kill in Boston. You learn how to be funny everywhere else, but in Boston, you had to kill because the guy before you and the guy after you were just going to crush. And you were going to look like a limp dick if you went up in between those two. So even Jonathan Katz, who had the hot show Dr. Katz on Comedy Central, was still an opener in Boston. And he had a guitar. He was a guitar act and a TV star, and he was still an opening act because he couldn't follow Kevin Knox and Don Gavin and Steve Sweeney and all these legends in Boston that were just so funny. And so I'm glad I went up there and did that. And I was, Louis C.K. came out of that time. He was kind of my year. After me was Dane Cook and Rogan and Billy Burr and all those guys. But it was such a feeding ground. And I used to think it was the best proving ground in the world for comics. But then someone humbled me and rattled off the Long Island guys. The Long Island guys, it's incredible. That list is it's Ray Romano, Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Rosie O'Donnell rather, and I'm leaving out everybody. Kevin James, all these. It's unbelievable the talent that came out of Long Island, not Manhattan, mind you, Long Island. It started with Robert Klein and just everybody after that. It's just this who's who of syndication deals that are worth $500 million. So we may have been funnier, but we weren't getting paid like the Long Island guys.
What, last question here. If there was a porno named after you, what would it be called?
Lord Thundercock, I think, probably. Kneel before Lord Thundercock. No, I don't know. Tiny Tim, Tiny Tom. I don't know.
Either one works. I mean, there's footage of your penis pressed against the window somewhere in Boston.
Just the testicles. Just the testicles.
Just the testicles. Okay. All right. Listen. Okay. Fine. Don't get all defensive. I like how you're like, hey, it's just the testicles. I'm not an animal.
I class the joint up. I keep the unit tucked in the pants. It's just the boys have to come out and get some fresh air every once in a while.
Dude, where can people find you on social media?
Well, it's tomcotter.com is the website, and then I'm pretty easy to find. I'm at Tom Cotter Comic on Instagram and Twitter, and unfortunately, I'm on TikTok now because I was forced into it by my children. And then, I have 2 Facebook pages. One's a fan page, one's a personal page. But people can find me, and they should definitely come out and see not just Tom Cotter, but Derek Richards when we're out on the road, because we're both very funny people.
Dude, you crack me up. I always love talking with you, like getting a chance to see you when you came out here to Las Vegas. And things will get back to normal here soon. So we got to get you back out here, get out to the East Coast. Now we try to hook up whenever I get out to New York, and you're always super busy, although now no one's doing anything.
Not so much. I would love to hang. I'd hang with you even when we weren't working. I would love to hang out with you.
I know. Well, what's funny is like I like when you ask people now, it's like, so what are you up to? And they just start laughing because you're just so used to saying that. We're so classically conditioned to say, hey, what are you up to? And people just start cracking up. I'm like, nothing.
Yeah, that's kind of how we are now. But what a great show. Thank you so much for having me on, buddy. And next time you're in my neighborhood or I'm in your neighborhood, we will lift the glass.
Absolutely. We will do that. Take care of yourself, my friend. We'll talk to you soon.
Adios, Derek. Thanks.